far left, we have Dr. Eric Odrosai, Dean, Graduate Studies and Research at the Institute of Local Government Studies. He's a chartered accountant and he's also a lawyer. In the middle, we have Most Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante, Chairman, Peace Council and immediate past presiding bishop, Methodist Church, Ghana. And on my immediate left, we have Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, Executive Director, Institute for Democratic Governance, and the recipient of the 2015 Martin Luther King Jr. Award for Peace and Social Justice.
Okay, 2014 recipient.
2014-2015. Yeah. Very privileged to have two recipients sitting on the set tonight. Welcome, gentlemen, to Agenda.
Thank you.
We'll start with you, Dr. Akwete.
Really?
Does it matter that we have a winner-takes-all politics in Ghana?
It does. It does because it's become retrogressive. It hasn't been able to move our country to the level of the development we should have in 2 decades. Nations transform in 2 decades. Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, after a brutal war, in 2 decades they transformed, okay? And we've had 24 years, soon 25 years of this politics, to the extent that it has not transformed our country to the levels that is comparable to the countries I've mentioned. With all the goodwill we got, yes, we've had a lot of goodwill from the international community. We've had debt relief written off. We've earned a lot, commodity prices, oil, and so on. And we are not even sure about the lower middle income status. Now, lower middle income status is nothing to be proud about because it only means that your middle income status is not stable. You can drop at any time unless you work hard.
But looking at where we came from, isn't that progression?
I think if we look at the totality of resources we have and that is being spent and what we owe and all that, we have cause to be dissatisfied. The transformation should have been real, but our politics is preventing that huge leap. Okay, because winner takes all simply means that we have multi-parties, different parties contest elections, but what we're saying by winner takes all is that when whichever power party that wins monopolizes executive power, nobody else in other parties could get in. Okay, you have no legal space. There is no space institutionally for any of the small opposition parties to get in. And even when they have to get in, it becomes a matter of, the benevolence, the charity of the president. And you are usually brought in your individual capacity much more than by your party or institution. But that is where the enormity of the power is, the decision-making power, control over the resources, over institution, over human resource, representing us, and so everything is there. So there is such concentration of power, of control over our resources. You determine our priorities and you do what you like. And ruling parties and presidents absolutely have this power. But it wouldn't have mattered if truly we were in an ANC situation. One party has so much power. Because in the 90s and probably early part of the 2000s, we did not talk much about winner takes all. But we also have evidence to show that you call it two-party. We have more than two-party. We have
like
two monopolies. Yes, we call them duopolies. And that is a structural change that has, challenged this arrangement where executive power has to be exclusively belong to one party, no matter what the margin is, whether in parliament or in the executive. And what we've seen is that increasingly, it means that you don't have the kind of support you need from the public, because the public tends to be polarized. Okay, so you are not able to mobilize support for the very hard decisions you might want to take, that which will transform the economy, that which will transform agriculture, that we would say education. Let's make sacrifices here. Let's move this, because the consensus you need from that, your counterpart who is equally as strong as you are, you cannot get it. And you have to think about elections. And so every time you stop short of what is required to move forward. And then it's changed our politics and the decisions that are required to bring about that change that would lift all of us up out of poverty and make sure that Our economic growth is higher and sustainable. The management of our resources are very efficient. We're beginning to feel that, yes, employment, whatever it is, the changes are taking place because the hard decisions are being made. Governments are not able to make those decisions because they want those projects that they can easily sell. That does not cause disaffection because the next election is around the corner. Exactly. And so on. So it's a system that, at the end of the day, probably it's helped us stabilize our electoral politics or develop it. You know, our electoral politics is strong. The turnout is high. About average 80%, presidential, parliamentary, which is pretty high, you know. But in terms of it being a vehicle for the economic and social transformation of our country in 2 decades, it has failed.
Dr. Oduro-Osai, it looks like we virtually are accepting because you see political aspirants, presidential aspirants saying, we have the men, giving the indication that when you vote us into power, we can get people within our camp to govern. How did we get here?
I think we got here because of our constitution. We got here because of our history. But then you see, as and when we develop our systems, we should know that the systems of yesteryears cannot help us to move forward. If we really want to move forward, we should do something about what we've been doing in the past. Because this winner takes all thing does not give us the opportunity to make good use of the available human resource that we have. Because no one political party can confidently convince me that they have all the men and the women to support them in the development process. You can have the other political parties having various human capital that can support us. So, but because it is winner takes all, one government comes to power, one party comes to power, they appoint all the ministers, they appoint all the chief executive, they appoint all the board chairmen of the various corporations, they take over everything. And you leave the other political parties to go into opposition. In that case, they oppose almost everything. They are confined into opposition. Even if the thing is good, they oppose almost everything because they've been given the profession or the job of opposing. You know, and it also divides us as a nation because and it forces the political parties and the people to do everything within their means to come back to power or to win or maintain power because of the fear of unknown. Because if I lose the elections now, I'll go into opposition for the next 4 years. Nobody will give me a contract. Nobody will give me any political appointment. Certain jobs that I'm highly qualified for, because I belong to these political parties, I may end up not getting it. It polarizes the society. That obviously is not good for us. And I think once the awareness have been raised, we need to think about it as a nation going forward. What can we do? We can start breaking the ice. We can start with the election of the chief executives. We can start by reducing some of the powers of the president. If we start by that, I'm very positive that gradually we'll be able to break the ice and then unify the country.
Well, we had an opportunity not too long ago to review the Constitution. Did we take advantage of that?
There are challenges with that. The Constitution Review Commission did it work. They made a recommendation. The government picked and chose the one they want to accept. The government rejected some of the proposals of the Constitution Review Commission. You know, so we all is not lost. I think there is an opportunity for the government to review the white paper on the report of the Constitution Review Commission so we can move forward. There is still room for improvement.
Most Reverend, winner takes all is very divisive. And as Dr. Oduro-Osai said, political parties are pushing to maintain or to come back to power. How do we make sure that we can, in the current constitution, which really gives all the power to the president, still be able to advocate for inclusiveness?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me take you back. For me, I always look at even winner takes all in terms of loser losing all. And if you look at the Ghanaian political landscape, politicking in this country is very, very expensive.
It is.
People spend a lot of money, some sell even properties. When they lose, they do not just lose power, they also lose economic power. All sorts of things to happen. And then, as they have already said, that means the use of limited human resources.
Isn't that the reason that there's this perception that when politicians are in power, they tend to want to pay back?
So what happens is that once I'm in power, I must make sure that I recoup. Once I'm in power, I must make sure that I stay on in power. Okay? And if I'm in opposition, I must also by all means come. I want to look at it from the perspective of peace. Election becomes do or die affair. Because when I lost everything, and I need to recoup that. So, as he said, and as my colleagues have already said, it is divisive, it polarizes us. But there is something that can be done. He's already touched on the reduction of the executive power. Reduction of executive power doesn't mean that you reduce the president, you don't allow him to function, but you more or less really devolute, devolution of power, in the sense that the district chief executives, metropolitan chief executives will be elected on partisan basis, because there is already election. They elect them. So, as soon as you say they should be elected, you say, oh, but we are already doing that.
Exactly.
But the election is not based on partisan basis. And I think that we should have a local governance on partisan basis, where parties would really come in to compete. If you look at, Dr. Akwete mentioned that 80% at the national level, the presidential parliamentary candidate, we have about 80% voter turnout. At the local level, it's 30%. The recent one, I think, is 40.
Yes.
And that means we have we've increased the number. Why is it that people are not interested in local governance? But you let us go into partisan politics at that level and see what is going to happen. Then when you do that, power is not going to be in the hands of only one party. Because it is possible for the ruling party not to be controlling a particular municipality. You can even be in Accra, and Accra may be in the hands of a different party. And we will be forced to come up with, the sharing of, I don't want to use that word in the sense of, simply sharing of power, but at least resources and other things. The Constitution, we will have to look at the Constitution and allow, the devolution of power that I've talked about, so that people at that level will also be able to control that. It's happening in a number of countries. And there will be competition, because if my party is in charge of a particular municipality, I would want the municipality, the nation, to know that if you give us power, we will be able to do something. And so I'm going to work hard to ensure that that municipality is well developed. So I think we need to look at our Constitution. As he has said, the white paper must be relooked again. Because, when they gathered information across the country, I'm very sure that a lot of people opted for the kind of thing that we're talking about. That white paper will have to be reconsidered, taken into consideration. This whole issue of winner winning all and the loser losing all.
If I may add, the Constitution Review Commission's report did not actually deal with local government election of DCs. It posed it as a question or a recommendation to be considered. Ghanaians must decide the decentralization system they want. And once that is decided, it's not an entrenched provision in the Constitution, so Parliament can act on that. Okay, so the white paper on that then said, okay, well, election, it did underscore that people want to elect DCs. But you see, if you want to elect DC, first of all, they are being elected. So the white paper did a smart thing and said, okay, so far the president has been putting up one candidate that is rejected, or supported.
That's not competitive election.
So they decided to increase.
That's not a competitive election, because the kind of election that I'm sure Ghanaians are pushing for.
Yes, so what they said in the white paper was that now the president would nominate 5, and then the Public Services Commission, which is a body that doesn't dabble in party politics, will then shortlist to 3. and then they'll be elected. How they'll be elected, by the assembly or by the entirety of the population, the electorate, they didn't clarify. But I think we've moved on. For example, the Institute and the Civic, IDEG and the Civic Forum Initiative in 2014 started intensify the campaign that we need to open up local government. The parties must get involved in local government. It's important. That would end exclusion. The day we don't even want only DCEs to be elected, you have to elect the assembly too. Because don't forget that there is 1/3 appointment by the president. And the system of individuals coming up, we know that the parties are involved, especially the two parties.
Exactly.
Look at the stalemate in Kumasi over choosing the preside. So we shouldn't ostrich all the time. I think we can be honest and say the system has evolved. We've had some stability. There is no doubt about that. But we've gotten to a point where we are matured enough to see how to move forward. So we started talking about what we call democratic devolution. That means open elections to the parties. The parties are in the districts, constituency, MPs, and they are there. They campaign. I mean, in the last month, where have they gone to campaign? The ruling party and the opposition. They went to the district. So what keeps parties out in local government? It no longer makes sense. So we said, let the parties go in. Now, if the parties go in, what you're going to have is that you're ending exclusion, and you're going to have the voters distributing, the 216 MMDAs, okay? Now, once that takes place, you also have to look at resources and autonomy of, because constituency control by, district control by NDC, district control by MPP cannot operate under the system, because the system gives all the power to the president, even the allocation. So you have to look at how fiscal decentralization would go to the extent that a party elected to govern a district would have enough resources mandatory, and they would also, their plans would be looked at, and so on. It's a reform that has far-reaching implications to whether our parties would only do elections, or they also have to equip themselves to do development.
And raise their own local resources, because if
exactly.
For instance, if the presidency is in the hands of NDC,
yes,
and a district is in the hand of MPP,
yes,
how do they then do lobbying to get projects into that district? Those are some of the challenges, and some people have expressed that fear that we may not be able to manage that adequately.
No, but the laws at the moment does not really discriminate, because when you look at the District Assembly Common Fund Act, it is clear that they use a formula for the distribution of the resources. So you don't need to be in the NDC or NPP to earn something from the common fund. What would really be lacking would be the ability to mobilize the revenue and the resources.
Doug, currently a lot of projects in the district are centrally managed. And,
fantastic.
And district chief executives, MMDs are lobbying to bring the central project into their district. That's where the challenge is.
We need a system overhaul.
Yes, it's because the chief executive was appointed by the president. If the chief executive was elected, this would have changed.
No, I think it requires more than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Elect the chief executive in assembly. Okay, let the parties compete, and let's find a system that would also take care of the needs of ethnic minorities, because in some districts you have, ethnic majorities in control. We are not saying we should shift from this system and then extend it or reproduce it at a local level. So, for instance, you want to see what kind of system would bring about minorities and marginalized group, women, youth, and so on, in the districts. So that is where we need to think through how a proportional, there are different ways in which it's been done in other places. In New Zealand, they have what they call the mixed member proportional representation. And various groups in the local level get in to also be part of decision making. Because after all, exclusion means you can't participate in those decisions that are made on the allocation of resources and the determination of the priorities. So the system needs overhauling. A lot more money then would have to be allocated to the districts. The 7.5% is not enough. Absolutely. In any case, it all doesn't go to the districts. And the laws are violated. Look, sometimes they are owed so much, which is not to happen, but it happens. So we need an overhaul. And we think that if you devolve, this would happen. You give them more money, but then we also have to strengthen the institutions that oversee how these monies and development programs will be put together for them to govern together with the president.
Most Reverend, the small parties, they are struggling in a system like this because their weight is small, and we have the winner takes all parties, or the party in government virtually running duopoly, whoever is in power at a particular time, running the whole show.
And
the smaller parties.
The professor is talking to you, so don't forget the term.
So the smaller parties are not growing.
Yes.
How do we overhaul the system so that we can have the smaller parties grow, so that we can actually practice the democracy?
You see, the very things we're talking about in terms of devolution of power at the local governance level is what is going to really get some of these smaller parties into the system.
Yeah.
Because some of them will be able, whereas they may not be able to compete at the national level, they may be able to gather their resources to compete at the local, at the district level. And once they get in there, their performance will also be seen. And that is how a lot of people are going to hear about them and also say that, hey, if we give them opportunity at a certain higher level, perhaps they will be able to do something. So I heard the discussion that went on when IDEC, came up with the, was it the conference or summit? Something. They were all very, 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 positive in terms of the, devolution of power at the local governance level, because they thought that is where they will really be able to also make a name. So I do believe, you were talking about challenges. There is nothing that, the moment you say you're going to go this way, you're going to encounter challenges.
The system.
There is no system without, challenges. But the challenges are there to be addressed. And nobody is saying that when we say, let's move away from winner takes all, we just jump into it. We will have to sit back. We will have to look at all the challenges, areas, resource allocation, and devolution of power. How are we going to do this? How do we really take care of minorities? All those issues that we have raised. I think it is important that as Ghanaians, we begin to really talk about these things and begin to find ways and means of addressing it. Why should we be sitting on, tenterhooks anytime, every 4 years? And in fact, our parties are not doing much for the 4 years that they are in power, but preparing to get into power or to retain power. Is this the kind of governance that we really are looking for? How about development and all that? And so we need to really overhaul the system to allow for what we are talking about, so that we will be able to sit back and say, hey, it is not just election, but it is also about development. So that soon after elections, we will concentrate on the developmental issues,
And there's good news. There's good news. I think the parties, NDC, NPP, and all the parties have declared that they support this idea. Okay,
who would initiate?
The initiation of it is something that will take place after the elections, but that's where we need to get the parties together. It's something the Peace Council has also been handling.
Once you get into power, then you are a winner and you have an opportunity to take
but
power. So there's no motivation to want to dissipate power at that point.
But what the Peace Council and us and other groups are discussing is that our parties truly have come round to this. In the past, they did not commit to it. They did it individually. You remember President Kufuor said we would elect DCs. He couldn't do that. NDC, if you read their manifesto, they also said we would do it. They couldn't do it.
2008.
Okay. Now,
they couldn't do it, or they didn't want to do it.
They didn't do it. I said they couldn't for various factors, but they didn't do it. That's what it amounts to. But this time around, when you find the two of them, the two duopolistic parties and the smaller party saying, yes, it's time to do it, it means that they could build consensus. So you need to convene them, bring them together for them to say, what will be the way? Because it's not just a party issue. It's a matter of national interest. Exactly. And we have national leaders. It is something so crucial to peace. okay, maybe this should be the last turbulent election we had, so that by 2020, with those kinds of reforms, you find out that the changes have come. And fortunately, I think this is something that the Peace Council and many other national leaders are signing on to. And the citizens themselves are speaking for it, because we've gone around the regions again. And that's why I said, why have you not been capturing them?
I'm sure we have been.
So, and there is such support amongst chiefs, that, yes, it is time, because everybody wants development closer and to end this system that brought us so far, but now we need to move higher, and it's clear that it cannot take us higher.
Doc, there's mutual suspicion. And so if I let you in, you might do something to sabotage, How do we deal with this suspicion so that people can be more comfortable? And do we see that in our next government, we are expecting some more participation?
Yes, we should have positive intent, positive expectations, because, see, we should continue to orient people that development should be seen at the local level. Because I'm yet to see any country that has developed from the top. You develop from the bottom, from the base, you aggregate it, and then together it becomes a national level development. We are doing so well when it comes to national level democracy, but we are not doing so well in a local level democracy. We can only deepen it if we are able to elect. These petty suspicions must be relegated to the background, because we should see ourselves as one people with a common destiny. I'm yet to see any of the political parties that will come out to say that I don't intend developing Ghana. Each and every one of them wants to develop Ghana. The only difference is the approach. So if it is the approach that is the difference, let's come down there. When you get to the local governance level, development is in your own hands. It's in your own hands. If you have people from the ruling party in the assembly, people from the opposition in the assembly, pull your resources together, develop the local government. After all, if all of us go on retirement, we go and live in a district, we go and live in a local government. And these politicians who live in the East Lagos and the Trasacos of this world, during Christmas, ask, where do they go?
They go to the
funerals,
district.
where do they go? They go to the district. So let us prioritize local level development by deepening local democracy, by making sure that we release the power. Let us allow the power to be totally decentralized. We shouldn't talk about decentralization in theory. We should practice decentralization. And thankfully, there is a local governance bill at the moment in Parliament. And I want to believe that some of these things we're talking about, the parliamentarians will take it on board in discussing the local governance bill. They've not yet passed it. If they will be able to make significant input into the bill towards breaking the monopoly in terms of power at the center. Because at the moment, we are recentralizing power within a decentralized system. Exactly. And we have a political institution superimposed on a seemingly non-political institution at the local government level. Look at KMA.
Isn't it because the chief executive of the district is a political appointee?
That is the challenge. And when you look at the problem in KMA, it's all about power. It's all about power.
And suspicion.
And suspicion. Because with a KMA issue can be resolved if it is agreed that, look, one person should become the presiding member, the other person should become the chief executive. Or one person become the presiding member, and then one person become the chairperson of the finance and admin committee. That will resolve the issue. So I think we should do more as a country towards deepening local democracy by allowing the power to go.
Prof, the smaller parties and the duopolies, the cost of campaigning and winning power is so huge these days. And a few days ago, we heard people virtually throwing money out of vehicles to party faithfuls who were cheering them up. These things are dangerous.
They are very, very, very dangerous. And they don't augur well for our democracy. You were talking about what can we really do to overcome some of these things, and we were talking about the mistrust. For how long are we going to practice our democracy in the context of mistrust? When are we going to allow our political culture to develop? Because I think we've come very, very far. And at this stage, we should be able to come together, irrespective of our various political leanings, to be talking about those things that will augur for the development of our nation. That's why we think this issue that we are talking about, also the political parties, the major ones, have talked about that.
It's left with the will.
So why can't they? We're not saying that, this election you go into it because it's too late. But after the election, why can't they come together, get some of their own experts, and for once tell Ghanaians, listen, we are coming together as Ghanaians, as people, as leaders of this nation, to look into this issue that could bring about the development of our nation. Talk about it, bring in experts to help us so that we will be able to move forward. Are we going to continue to sit back and say, I'm afraid this person is coming in here? We're all Ghanaians. At the end of the day, when Ghana is developed, it's developed for all of us. I keep on saying to people that if I'm not in government and I sit back and say, okay, let them do it, because I want them to fail so that I'll be in a position to tell people, come back to power. If they dig that deep hole, you fall into it. And it's only 4 years. By the time we see the top of your hair, your time is up and you have not been able to do anything. So why don't we at some point bury these kinds of differences and begin to talk openly and agree to disagree on issues that will help us move our country forward? The smaller parties have something to offer. And I think once we open the door, we will be able to gather information from all of them. And that will help us in terms of what we're talking about.
We're still discussing the winner takes all politics and whether there are any solutions inside. My guests that have been doing this with me, Dr. Odrosai, Most Reverend Emmanuel Asante, and then we have Dr. Akwete. Doug, the 40-year development plan is seen as one that, if we manage that process well, we can have continuity in governance.
In terms of development.
In terms of development programs and policies, because currently political parties implement their manifestos.
Yes.
And so if we have a 40-year development plan in place, then they will be forced to do continuity, even though that is not.
There are two views. There are those who think you force them with a law, say you contested for power, you said the economy is not going well, and you want to change certain things, but the law says if you come and continue do what didn't work. That's problematic. Okay, I think
For instance, when we have infrastructure, for instance, the affordable housing that the MPP started, the NDC came and they didn't continue. The change from 3 years to 4 years and back to 3 years for SHS, those are problematic for development.
That is why, you see, what we need first is the political consensus. Once you build a political, that's why opening the system is important at the local level, because once they get involved in the executive government at the local level, you can only govern a unitary government with a president where there is a common program of work. And that's what happens when there are coalitions or something. NDPC would be able to pull that together. If you take the manifesto of the NDC, PPP, and probably I hear that NPP would launch there soon, and you look at it, there you find a convergence. If you operationalize it, how are you going to do it? And those areas are national. Where there are agreements, they don't need to formally sit and say, yes, we agree here and so on. But a technical body like NDPC could pull it together and see where there is convergence, there is no political issue. So it's for them, they can run with it. So programs will be brought up, which shows where they meet. And once that happens, the president with his authority and all that, he's still the president, would have to work with those in the districts and so on. So for me, what I see happening is that we are going to, by opening up the system for a president from one party working with chief executives from different parties and assemblies, that working together is going to deal with the trust issues, is going to change the politics. Because if you need more resources beyond, let's say, the 7.5%, you would have to engage NDPC, you have to talk to the president, and in fact, political relationships are going to change. You will find with an NDC, CPP, chief executives, much more than probably MPP district chief executives, because There are issues there. They are not able to get programs, the results they want, and so on. So it is some kind of a structural change, a strategic change that would, shake the system up and reposition it. And I think that we should be courageous to do that. Once we do that, the continuity of the 40-year plan is established. Because what you see is that a DCE from NDC, NPPC, CPP,
and all the others.
PNC, PNC, and others, you find out that they started a project before the elections, okay? And they find it very important, whether it's education, quality of education, more students passing BEC, and so on and so forth. And they would not just sit there for it to be thrown away like another party came and said, I'm changing everything. In fact, you can't change everything because the parties would fight. 2, if they are not getting their money, under this current system, no DCE or chief executive can take the president to court, although the law says you cannot hold the funds, it must go quarterly and so on. But under that system, people will be demanding their money from their share from the common fund. Exactly. It's going to change the dynamics at the center. Top. Yes, at the top. They'll use the law and so on. So it's a kind of change that truly lays the foundation for the 40-year plan to work. It will then, when you come in, it's not just a law, compelling you to do what you said you wanted to change, but it's rather the law empowering you to say, this is where we've made progress, okay, in this sector. And you have a technical report that shows where we are and what we need to go and what your own manifesto has said, And so it will be, we need the political reform to underpin the long-term development strategy. If we don't do that, then it's going to be quite controversial. Yeah.
Doc, the current constitution and laws that we have actually promotes and entreats government to continue things that have were started by previous
ongoing
government.
Projects. Yeah.
But we don't see that happening, and we see infrastructure projects huge, abandoned, and something as sensitive as education going through double transformation because of politics.
Yes.
How do we fix such things? I mean, before we get to that point where we let DCEs and we get a 40-year development plan working
I'm sure that is why the long-term development plan is important. And it is not only important, but then it should be made binding on all successive government. And in other countries or other jurisdictions, I know that they have even converted it into a law. So it is a long-term development law. They have various thematic areas which have been aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Are you advocating for a law to back the 40-year
I'm advocating that once the long-term development plan is completed, they should make sure that parties will buy into it and then we convert it into a law to bind them. If it is possible, we should, so that we can subject it to annual review. It's very important we do that for sustainable development. It's very important we do that so that we can bind government to continue as far as practicable the various projects and programs that have been commenced by previous government. At the moment, you go to the district assemblies and you can imagine what is happening there. I read somewhere in the Presidential Transitional Bill or law that a month before we go into an election, the sitting president or government will have to prepare handing over notes. I can imagine what will be in the handing over notes in terms of outstanding projects and the extent to which it will bind any other successive government, whether they win or another government wins. So the National Long-Term Development Plan is good. And one other important feature of the National Long-Term Development Plan is the development of a national infrastructure plan. They are going to develop a national infrastructure plan that would also do a mapping of the infrastructure requirements of the country in the next 40 years, so that it will help all of us, including the current government and the successive government, to buy into it. The question then is, would it be biting and binding enough on all the governments? Because we've had it in the Constitution, as you rightly said, directive principle of state policy, as far as practicable, continue the projects and programs commenced by the previous government. Most of the governments have reneged and violated this particular all-important provision in the Constitution. So it's about time we do something about it. And I'm sure if we manage the long-term development plan well, it will be one of the ways.
I have a problem with this law and the binding. If the Constitution is not binding enough so far, what would that law do? Okay, so we have to.
But then currently, if the parties are talking about ideologies, and I am Social Democrat, they have different ideologies, and depending on when that plan was put in place.
As a nation, we are not. We don't respect our laws, comply with them. It's violated at all levels, and there is no enforcement. Okay, so what does accountability mean? Accountability means you'll be held in compliance with the law. But who does that? So putting so much faith in the law would frustrate us. I think we need political settlement first, and we are getting there. Because what I know from NDPC is that they've consulted the parties, and there's broad-based support for the idea of a 40-year plan. Okay, but let's not say it can be turned into law. What will be turned into law will be the priorities, is the framework. A country like this needs growth. Our growth level rate should go to about 12 to 15% per annum. For 10 years, if we can do this, we'll generate enough resources to speed up the transformation.
It has been pegged at 1.8%.
Pardon?
It has been pegged at 1.8%.
What is 1.8? Growth?
The annual growth, the population growth. Yes.
No, I'm talking about economic growth.
Economic growth.
Yes, okay. Economic growth. So if that is something we must bind ourselves to, because that is how you can generate so the policies you pursue you must demonstrate that it will maintain that high level of growth. It's not going to drop it. So those are some of the things that will be enforced. But there would also be the flexibility, because the 40-year plan is going to be implemented through 10 medium-term plans, 10 four-year plans. Okay, and that 4-year plan, the second one, the first one, hopefully they are planning that by 2018, that is what is on the table. But in 4 years, they have to review how much we achieved. The goal set, that is in the law.
Is it deliberate to look at what parties have been able to achieve?
No, to look at the mandate period. The mandate period of government is 4 years. So, but is there that this is the long-term framework within which you should operate? How you sustain the higher level of growth or attain it and keep it there and go higher is what you have to demonstrate. Okay, so every 4 years or even every year, the review and so on, they will respond to the dynamics and the changes. Certainly we may go up, we may come down, but there will be greater effort to achieve or sustain a certain level. And those are the areas that we need to see how we strengthen ourselves. In the UK, for instance, continuity is assured by the civil service. Exactly. A professional, impartial civil service. They have powers. They will tell you what the situation is. In fact, the UK chief, one of the former heads of civil service, came to Ghana and said that, look, they translate every party's manifesto into a 4-year. They have a 5-year system, a 5-year program of work, and they can tell you immediately what is being done and what resources have been committed. And then where the gaps are. In one-on-one meetings, they have all these discussions going on. So you don't come and behave as if there is nothing. You don't behave like Trump.
I'm not sure Trump will be happy with this comment.
I don't think so. Most Reverend, accountability is very important.
Yes.
And the people, the government needs to account to the people. And we go back to elections. Are we really seeking accountability, and are we responding to what the parties are giving us?
The question is, if you want somebody to account for something, you must know what it is that you voted for. Okay, we've been talking about party manifestos. Do we really understand these party manifestos in this country? Do people vote on the basis of party manifestos to the extent that
within the door police?
Do we hold people to account for what they said they would do? Do we even understand what they said they would do? This is where the 40-year plan and those things become very, very crucial.
Exactly.
Because if there's going to be convergence, they have given you general areas where we can work. And within a certain period, you have come up to say that I will do this, and that, and that, and that. It falls within that. At least the leadership of the nation, the elites of the nation, should be in a position to hold you accountable in respect of what you said you would do in relation to the general development of this nation. But we are talking. I have said that I mean, your manifestos are written in a kind of language that people do not even understand. So when you say that manifesto, this is what I'm going to do. You ask the average voter, average party supporter, whether they have really even taken time to read their own party's manifesto, and they know. So accountability, what are we going to hold them? Came in power. You know how he came in power. He was not elected into power at that time. And he said, if I did not fulfill anything, you cannot hold me accountable, because I didn't come to tell you that I will do this, I will do that, I will do that.
Moving forward, what should we be expecting from the Peace Council in a few minutes? In a few seconds, actually, we are running out of time.
No, the Peace Council, working together with other bodies, institutions like the IDEC and UNDP, with the support of UNDP and other institutions like USAID and all that. All that we are looking forward to is to ensure that the 2016 election, it's something that is characterized with, decorum, and that we do things in a peaceful manner.
Our time is up, actually.
Yes,
okay. I'm really sorry.
Okay.
Doc, just a few lines.
Yeah, yes, we should improve accountability. We should assure the people of accountability, and then make sure that in accounting we should explain what we've not been able to do and why, not what we've done.
I think manifestos are not enough. They have to be translated into programs. They should be made mandatory. And I think the Peace Council, the importance of the Peace Council is that they are, today in Ghana, they are the convening authority for political dialogue. So I think that we also
support
see
the
how,
Peace Council. Thank you very much for being part of this, and thank you very much, Dr. Eric Oduro-Osai, Most Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante, and Dr. Emmanuel Akwete. And thanks for being part of the show. Thanks to the production team. God willing, next week I'll bring you another show. My name is Deborah Kwabla. Enjoy your weekend. Bye.